Hi, everyone. I'm Marla Miller from marlamiller.com. And my new interview show, Authors and Book Promotion in the 21st Century, I founded because I want to help authors find their audience. And I want my audience to know about these fabulous books that are out there. And today I'm particularly excited because I have a friend of mine who has been, we've been linked together for many years through the Southern California Writers Conference. Jennifer Silva Redmond, welcome to my show. And I have to tell my audience that I'm really excited about this book, your memoir, because we've talked about it you've been talking about this memoir for a long time. Honeymoon at Sea. Wait, there's a sub. How I found myself living on a small boat. And you have lived on a small boat you're going to tell us that story. Welcome to the program, Jen. I know that this book isn't even out yet. It's going to be officially out September 19th. But I really, and you know me, I track authors. I have not known an author who has done such a stellar job of promoting their book before it's even out for the public to buy. So you're going to tell us about that and hopefully give us some tips. Jen, take it away. It's all yours. I'm thrilled.
Oh, thank you, Marla. It's great to be here with you. And this is, as you say, such an important topic because I think a lot of times, how many times have people said like, okay, I'm done with my book now. How do I start marketing? And you're like, oh, honey, you got to start, pretty much as you're writing the book, you have to be aware of the things we're going to be talking about. But I will say from the beginning that I have always thought that this book was going to be a book that I was going to eventually self-publish or work with a hybrid publisher because I thought that the book might feel too much of a niche book. It's a book about sailing, and people would just put it in that little niche thing and not think of it as a larger audience. So as far as demographic, it would be, women who sail. Well, that's not a bad demographic. I happen to belong to a forum on Facebook that's got 17,000 people on it, and they're women all over the world who sail. So, I mean, there's a good group out there, but I didn't want it to be just that. So I lucked into a publisher. I mean, I really saw someone who I loved her attitude. I loved her presence on social media. And I started reading her little newsletter. And then she was putting out a call and wanted women who had unusual memoirs. And so I knew she was looking for Canadian authors because she's based in Canada. But I thought, what the heck? So I sent it to her. And long story short, she sent me an email saying that she liked the first 50 pages and she wanted more. And then later, we decided to have her. I know we're not talking about publishing, so I don't want to go into that too much, except to say.
Yeah, no, tell us the good stuff.
Yeah. The good stuff is that she has a publicist who's very good, who works with her. And, Sasha, the publicist, has found me so many different opportunities that I would not have thought of. And Rebecca Eckler, who runs the publishing company, is also full of stories and ideas. So she'll get up one morning, and she's 3 hours ahead of me. So when I get up at 6, I'll see, you should write 5 tips for how to keep a marriage together. And I'm like, how would I know how to keep a marriage together? But, of course, I've been married for almost 35 years on a small boat, which is a lot of people would look at as like, that's a miracle. So I thought, okay, I can say what I think, here's some ideas that I think are, and so that got pitched and they picked it up, and I'm in Authority magazine online, as this marriage expert. So, and she's also been able to get me on. Yesterday, the podcast was Finding Your Bliss, which is a really wonderful podcast, as well as Positive Talk Radio. So neither of those I was aware of. So now I'm not only enjoyed doing those podcasts, but now I'm listening to the podcast because it's really me. It's my kind of crowd. Like, who needs to hear more negativity, right? We need more positivity. So there's a real market for that. There's a real market for people to tell stories that are uplifting. Now, not everybody's going to have an uplifting book, but there's going to be podcasts about true crime. There are podcasts about everything from organic gardening to, who knows what, every type of genre has a podcast now. So in addition to having this publicist, I've been thinking about this book for a long time. As Marla says, I've been talking about it for 20 years. I've really been writing it for 30 years because it really began as journal entries in 1989 and 90 on this trip in which we took off on a small boat.
Which you thought was going to be a honeymoon, yes?
Thought was going to be a 3-month honeymoon, ended up being a 1-year honeymoon, but then it continued. We never really stopped sailing. We sailed to Florida after Mexico, then we sailed onward, then we sailed back to Mexico. Now we've sailed all over the Pacific coast, and now we're in Washington State. So yeah, the honeymoon continues big time.
Let me ask you this. Yeah. Was there ever a moment in those early months of living on the boat when you had the discussion with Russell that, gee, honey, maybe we should just live here permanently? Or did he say that? How did that come about?
It actually, there was never a discussion about it. It was like we just kept doing it, and I think the fact that because Russell already wanted to be a painter, he was a very successful illustrator, so he wanted to be a painter. It's one of his paintings behind me.
I didn't know that.
And so he was painting, and many days of he'd get up and paint, and I was sitting there going like, okay, I've been an actor. What am I going to do now? There's no auditions to be had. I can't wait tables, which was my only skill. So I was like, well, what am I doing? So I was writing journal entries, and those started getting turned into articles and essays, and I was writing poetry, and I was writing short stories, and I began to feel like this is as good an expression of myself to share my inner life or whatever you want to say with the world as and it doesn't have all the drawbacks of having to audition and go and stand in line and beg people to let them even audition. Writing has a kind of a wonderful freedom to it for all of its drawbacks as like, how do I get it out there to people? There's the beauty of every day you can be doing your art. There's never an excuse. There's never anybody telling you can't, other than maybe your boss if you're doing it at work. But you've always got time to write a couple hundred words, and you can find time for that. But anyway, so back to the marketing thing is I was thinking of all of these places I had published short articles in Cruising World. I had published things in Latitude 48 or Latitude 38, which is based, it's a sailing magazine based out of San Francisco. So I contacted them as soon as I knew that I had this contract and that the book was going to be out this year. And I eventually did an article in Latitude 38 that was about sailing in the San Francisco Delta, which we had just done for a season. And to them, they said, we don't want to do an article about you have a book coming out. But do you have an article about what you do? Fine. Then my byline
is underneath.
Exactly. Her memoir, Honeymoon at Sea, is coming out in September. Boom.
You got it.
So that's free advertising to like 50, no, it's like 70,000 people circulation. So another one was Discover Baja. They're a travel club based out of San Diego. They handle all the travel and insurance problems for people going to Baja, but they're also like a Baja Brotherhood. Everybody knows everybody. There's thousands of people. So when I talked to them, they said, well, write us up something and we'll put it in there. And that was the day I hit #1 in pre-sales in Latino.
Did you really?
Biographies.
I didn't know that, Jen.
On Amazon, it said #1 new release, even though it was a pre-release.
That's wonderful,
because that many people ordered it that day. So that was just me relying on the contacts, the people that I already knew from I Love Baja, I Love Sailing. I wasn't going and knocking on the door of, a parenting magazine, but because I'm not a parent, but I mean, you know what I mean? I wasn't knocking on the door of a architectural magazine trying to sell them something.
If I can put a few words to what you just said, you drew a circle around your potential market.
Yep.
And those were people and organizations that you already had some interfacing with.
Right. Exactly.
And once you planted all those seeds, then it started growing, because it really is growing. And I'm
Exactly.
not just blowing smoke here. I mean, you are killing it. When I was at the Santa Barbara Writers Conference, there were a couple of people who were getting ready to publish their books, and I said, "Are you doing any pre-publication
Right.
marketing?" No, no. I said, it's
This
critically
is the thing.
important that you do that.
This was
And
my publisher. My publisher said, we have to hit this hard and fast and early, like 3 months before publication. So
right,
she had Sasha on it from word one. So I wrote up, what I thought, here's my bio, here's my
yeah,
this, here's my that. And then they were put together a press kit. And then, but she got me a bunch of stuff that I, once again, would not have thought of doing, this, you know, simple life or finding your bliss or positive this and that. And then even recently, the thing about marriage, but another thing about parenting. And I went, I'm not a parent. I've never been a parent. She went, no, but parents want to know, are you happy with having chosen to not be a parent? So I wrote something about that,
interesting.
which
That's a hot
I'm
topic.
exactly. And they're pitching that. So, I'll tell you next time if that happened. But some of these,
Interesting.
I've written them on spec. I'm not getting paid to do it,
Yeah,
but if it goes into that magazine, it's going to pay back big time. So it's worth it to me to
wonderful.
spend the time
Absolutely.
to do 1,000 words or 1,200 words. But having somebody coming up with ideas for you is super helpful. And also just believing that it has legs,
Well,
that it
yeah.
has a more appeal than just this. So one of the things you and I were talking about is when people can take, okay, I've written a genre, cozy mystery, but I'm also a surfer. Well, don't neglect the crowd you already know for the crowd that you don't know. So go to the things and say, I'm here because I'm a surfer, but I've written this book. Well, then somebody says, hey, I know a guy at this magazine. He likes writing about surfers and, and their what they do outside of that. You know what I'm saying? It
Yes.
could be insurance. It could be, remember Teresa Burrell, she'd say, I go to home shows and I sell books because I'm the only person there. It's like, oh, okay, no one thought of that,
Hmm.
and she'll sell books. So it's thinking outside that thing of, I have to
And
sell to people who sail boats.
you have had help with your
Mhm.
publisher and your publicist, much like, back in the day, publishers used to help and their marketing
Right,
teams used to
right.
help authors. I know that you were editor-in-chief
Mhm.
of a small
Yep,
press in San Diego, and so
yep,
you're familiar with this. You know that
yep.
it's it takes a village. It
It
takes a
does.
village. It really
It
truly does. I
does.
know it's an
It does.
overused cliche, but it really does take a village. And so I think that for those that are listening to this interview, um, I want you to appreciate that if you are self-publishing, if you have a small press, or
Right.
if you are traditionally whichever avenue you're
Mhm.
going down, you need help. You
Mhm.
can't do it alone. And
Right.
I would recommend that if you don't have a publicist that's connected to your publisher,
Gross.
that you start doing some homework and looking for good
Yep.
publicists, because you need to make an investment. You've spent all this time writing the
Right.
book,
Yep.
right?
Right.
And so
But
then you need to make an investment in selling the darn book.
and you need to follow them now. People go, oh, but the book's not even, I'm not even querying it till next year. Perfect time to get to know publicists and people who do book
Absolutely.
promotion, because they
Absolutely.
should wow you with what they're doing for everyone else. And that's what happened. I mean, they were selling a book by a reality TV personality who's very famous in Canada. But
Mhm.
I thought, well, if she can do this, then let's follow up on all of this. And so she would send me to the same ones and pitch it. And of course, obviously, I know how to have fun on camera, and I know how to talk to people. I know how to be, I'm outgoing and all of that. So not everybody is going to feel as
Not everyone
comfortable
is
going
right.
going on podcasts. But remember, you're you, as you just said, you've spent all this time. Don't let the book down now. You know,
Exactly.
there was a reason that you would put your butt in that chair for all those hours every year, every
That's right.
day for a year, or years in this case.
Yeah.
And so you need to be that excited about it as you are when you're telling your friend about it, or you're hanging at your writers group like, oh,
Yep.
I just wrote this great chapter. You know, those are the things you need to bring to life when you're pitching it, and also when you're selling it online. Um, and speaking of old friends, August McLaughlin, that does Girl Boner Radio, she
Yeah.
had me on because talking about sex and sexuality and living in a small space. So
Yeah.
for her, that
We've
I
talked
just,
about that because I've
yeah,
wondered about it.
exactly. Everybody goes, but how do you,
How
but
the
when do
hell
you,
do you do that?
and how do you not, and how do you, know, all the different permutations of that. So
Sure,
I'm going to
sure.
be on her show. We already taped that. I'm going to be on her show in November. So that'll bring me to a whole new
Wonderful.
audience as well. But it's good for her because that's something people aren't thinking of. Sure,
Absolutely.
we're thinking of this and that, you know, kind of typical sexuality stories, but how about living with somebody in a space as big as a, you know, mansion's walk-in closet? You know,
I
what is
know.
that like?
I
You
know.
know, and what is that as you grow older, and how do you keep the spark alive and all that kind of stuff. So that's the thing that people don't think about when they're pitching their books to publish, you know, to publicize it, is they think, okay, I just have to say this is my genre and this is the story. But it's like, what do you bring to it? What are your
Right.
joys? What are your hobbies? What are the things you're passionate about? How can that tie in? Or how can it be something you pitch to, you know, we did with Eric Peterson. We went to his alma mater and we pitched it to his, you know, his college. They did a thing about it. We pitched it to his hometown paper in Palo Alto, or they did a piece on it. We did, I mean, because he had so much food in the dining car. He went to hundreds of people, guys who did can't remember the guy, he's famous for barbecue and he had a show on TV. And so he had talked about Eric's book and talked about, and in that blurb ended up being a part of what helped open up other doors for him.
Sure.
And he would do things like go to a brewery or a distillery or a food place and promote the book through that.
And let me
So
just say that all the things that you're talking about that I hope authors and writers who are hoping to be authors are taking notes on take a lot of time and an investment, usually in money, even if it's just to pay for the gas and the lodging to get to a place. You have to do that. The other thing though that I want to make mention of, and I put this on my Facebook page, I think yesterday, about you in the book. Unhooking readers. When an author is working as hard as you're working to sell this book, your publisher is loving you.
yeah, yes,
Because you're making money, not just for Jennifer, you're making money for the house. And
true.
and writers have to appreciate the business end of this. So my guess would be that when you have your next book coming out, whenever that is, that your publisher would very much want you to stay in-house with that book, because
And they've
she's
already
seen
got,
your
yeah,
track record,
they've
right?
already got first refusal for the next book, and we've
There
already
you
talked
go.
about them doing it. And so far, I'm so incredibly happy, you know,
Yeah.
so that's been very, very positive experience. But, you know, one of the things that I think too is that having been in acquisition meetings, I mean, I
Yeah.
wasn't an acquisition editor, believe me, people have conversations where you've got 8 people around the table. They're like, yes, it's a good book, and yes, it's well written, and yes, it fulfills some of our mission. What else?
That's
Because there's
right.
got to be something else. And I
Exactly.
would say things as, I mean, I remember saying, this guy can talk. He's charming. He's
He's
belongs to
going
a
to
lot
sell
of
the
different
book.
groups.
Yeah.
He's very much of a mover and shaker. He'll get out and do talks, and people are like, oh, okay, tell me more about that. Because that
Exactly.
is how we help to sell a lot of books, is by authors. And I think people think, oh, if I get a book contract with Simon and Schuster, I don't got to worry about this or any
Well,
of
I
the other
had
big
one.
ones. Not true.
It
Not
isn't true,
true.
but we've only got a few minutes
Yeah.
left, and I want to make one more point to you, because you talked about, I think, catching the tailwind
Yes.
of an author in your house that was very well known. That's brilliant strategy, brilliant strategy. But I want to push it a little further, because I know that you and Russell also have a very deep history in screenwriting.
Mhm.
Do you see this book? Is that a hope that this book will
Funny
be
you should
optioned?
say that. Funny you
Yes,
should say that
because it's
because
perfect,
yeah,
I think.
we just got a review in Los Angeles Book Review, and it was what it for people that don't know, there's no such thing as paying for a good review. That doesn't happen. That's not a thing. But you can pay to expedite reviews,
Mhm.
and that is money well spent. In other words, if you know that your book is coming out in a certain month, and you can go to
Right.
you know, any number of
I get
Kirkus or
you.
any other review and pay to have the book expedited onto the queue.
Mhm.
Still means they could give you a bad review. You can choose not to
Right.
have it published. But this was huge. And she said, I'm going to do this because I'm thinking Hollywood. That's my publisher talking.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, I think people have said this would make a great documentary or maybe a Netflix type, you know, ongoing
Absolutely.
series, you know, and I actually, one guy that interviewed me said, so who's going to play you? I go, well, J-Lo's kind of too old. And he just cracked up, you know, so I
You know
gave him
what?
some names.
We're at
Yeah.
the end of this interview. I could go on and talk
No,
with you
no.
for a lot longer, and perhaps you'll come back after it becomes a
Yes.
bestseller, and then you can tell us that portion of this success story, because I think
Yes.
you got a real winner here, and
And
I couldn't be happier for you.
if people want to follow along, Google
Mhm.
Honeymoon at Sea, and I have a Substack, and I'm talking every week about what I've accomplished as far as all the podcasts and links to those podcasts and links to radio shows and links to places that I'm doing book signings. And
And where
remember,
is that, Jen? On
it's
Substack?
Honeymoon at Sea at Substack. So
Good.
if you just Google Honeymoon at Sea, after you'll see a few things about where to get away on your honeymoon to Fiji. You'll see Honeymoon at Sea Substack, and my
Great.
Substack there is free to join, and
Good.
you'll see all the things we've been doing for the last couple months.
Wonderful.
So I hope you'll enjoy that.
And so for writers on the road to publication, hoping to be authors, what Jennifer Silva Redmond is offering you is a tutorial. So just go to Substack and take notes. Take notes on what she's doing, because she's doing it brilliantly. Jen,
Thank
I
you.
can't wait to talk to you again after the book comes out.
Yes.
Thanks for taking the time, because I know how busy you are, and we really
Thank
appreciate
you.
it here on
All right.
Authors and Book Promotion in the 21st Century, and you are killing it in the 21st century, girlfriend.
Thank you. Thanks again, Marla.
Absolutely. And I'm going to turn this off, I think. And again, this is my 6th interview, so I hope
Cool.
that my peeps will hold on. I hope that my peeps will